the record button. All right, so I have George from Minuttia here with me today, and we're going to be talking about the difficult state of, well, content marketing in 2023. Is it difficult? Is it not difficult? But it's definitely changed, and it's changing. So yeah, the global downturn in SaaS has probably affected us all. George, your agency is servicing SaaS businesses predominantly, right? Can you maybe like fill us in for those of the listeners that don't know you yet, like, which is probably going to be the minority, but still what you guys do, how long you've been on the market, and the kind of services you're offering?
Yeah, so my name is George. I'm running Minuttia, which is a content marketing agency. And recently I also launched Growth Waves, which is my newsletter where I share stuff that I don't share anywhere else online. So feel free to subscribe. It's also free, and it's bi-weekly. So as you mentioned, yeah, we serve the SaaS industry, and the agency exists for in January of 2024 we will have 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as you correctly put it, things are a bit, I don't know, tough right now for the SaaS industry. But I would say that, first of all, I think that I sort of saw that coming, because what followed the COVID-19 outbreak was a hiring frenzy like no other, and excessively high valuations, in some cases inflated, right, with as high as 20x revenue multiples, and money flowing into marketing and growth oriented activities. And I would say that all these things, even though obviously it was a great run for many service providers for as long as it lasted, were sort of artificial, right? And unfortunately, many of these businesses, many of these agencies or freelancers or whatever, they sort of based their business model and their services and their pricing as an extension to something that we all understood, or most of us at least understood, that is sort of inflated, right? And so there was not so much ROI scrutiny, even back in 2022, right? And there was a lot of money going into growth oriented activities, and I would say that obviously this has sort of changed now, and now we can see that companies, it's not that they're just more tight with their budgets and everything, but it's just that I would say disoriented right now, because on top of everything else that's been going on the macroeconomic, let's say, situation that's been created, you also have to add AI and the upcoming changes in search, which most companies, believe it or not, regardless of the size, do not know exactly how to navigate these changes, right? So in a nutshell, this is how I think how I perceive things right now and where I think we are at. And yeah,
that's well, thanks for setting the stage and the ground for this conversation. I obviously come from the other end of the spectrum, so from the in-house SaaS team's perspective, and what I've seen on my side, especially in the last few months, maybe it's a result of SaaS marketing leaders kind of freaking out about generative search and again declaring SEO is dead. Maybe it's also a function of lower conversion rates from search as a result of the global downturn and fewer budgets, that it's not as easy to convert people as it was a few years ago, while the competition in SERPs is so much higher at the same time. Because while the market was inflated, everyone was publishing. So these days, to maintain the same number of conversions from content from SEO, you need to do so much more and work so much harder and invest a lot more in it. That's kind of my perception. I feel some marketing leaders are deciding to turn away from content and start looking into investing in either outbound sales or even more traditional marketing activities, like you name it, physical events, dinners with executives. Everyone wants to go upmarket. Everyone wants to be enterprise. So I feel like the SMB customers are kind of being left behind. People don't want to invest in self-serve and PLG as much anymore. And, obviously content and SEO are these evergreen lead-making machines, but mostly for the self-serve sector, right? Because you can't control the lead size from content. Like there are only so many keywords that you can add for enterprise to like restrict the lead size. What's your take on this?
First of all, regarding the last point, there may be some opportunities, but this is also case specific, right? So if you are an email marketing software, you may be able to talk about how to clean your email list, right? Because the assumption is that someone who's looking for that, most likely they have an email list. But then even if you like get in front of these people's eyes, how can you expect to turn them like into customer, right? To switch from another provider to you. I would say that if anything, right now, the changes in search, and I would say predominantly the changes in search, because I feel that when it comes to AI, the dust has sort of settled, and I don't see as much buzz around it anymore. But then again, I don't know. I don't spend as much time online on social media anymore, so I don't know. But SG in particular, I feel that it works as an amplifier of the already tough situation most of these companies are in, right? Because I mean, let's face it, if things were okay and companies could have access to capital through VCs and so on, and acquisition was a bit better, I mean, yeah, we would be concerned about SG, but not as much as we are now. And the reason is that, as you mentioned, like things are already somehow difficult, right? Now, of course, this creates an issue, because let's assume that some of these companies will try to find a way out of organic search and search for alternatives like paid, like events, like, I don't know, all these things are already saturated and cluttered. And at the same time, I mean, we work with a very big LMS learning management system company, right? And they are doing something around 150 events per year, both physical and like online, right? But for them, it makes sense because the average LTV is around 30K, right? Yeah. If your average LTV is $200, would you make 150 events per year? Or would you spend, I don't know, $500 to acquire a customer through paid search? I don't know. I have a question mark there. But at the same time, you know what? The problem is not that Google is taking or not taking. We will see how this will play out. Organic search away. The problem is that organic search was the channel of the average, right? Because you could easily get away with average content, which is not the same as like publishing something on LinkedIn. If it's average, you will get like instant feedback whether or not people like it and resonate with it. Whereas with SEO content, like as long as the clicks were coming in, like you could check that box. You did your work as a content, you did your job as a content marketer, right? So it was and it still is to a certain extent, a channel of the average. And I think that what we don't like right now, and what's causing a lot of discomfort right now, is that we will have to think different, as Steve Jobs would put it. We have to think differently about content, and it's not like we will be able, assuming that organic search is not as powerful anymore, and it's not like one of the channels that companies are predominantly used for acquisition or distribution. We have to be better, right? And I think this is what's causing a lot of discomfort right now and makes us feel a bit inconvenient, let's say. I know what your thoughts are, but that's my feeling.
I think you mentioned an important aspect of it, which is revenue reporting and attribution, that in like the fat years of, say, 2020/2021, when capital was abundant, people could just throw money at a channel and don't really worry at like the rate it's converting specifically. But now, especially in B2B SaaS, and your agency's servicing B2B SaaS, right? These companies need to look at capital efficiency again. So they are getting questions from their boards, from their investors, and I know because I'm getting as well. Like, how is the money, what is the return on the money they spent? Which wasn't exactly the case a couple of years ago, where growth was, the predominant factor. So we were looking at like these very leading metrics, like the number of signups, the number of visitors, and we would worry about converting them into paying customers later, right? But now the crunch came, and we're sort of being evaluated based on the actual revenue generated. And it's turning out, well, not all of this content was able, not all of this content is able at all, right? Like a lot of top, mid of the funnel content, it needs to be nurtured. Like these people need to somehow capture the attention of these leads and funnel them down. So there is a whole new level of complexity. It's basically not about just producing content. And as I said, since everyone was producing it, like it's become very saturated. It's actually hard to rank well for these keywords. And then it's again hard to convert this attention into signups and into something meaningful. So yeah. I
agree with you. And as you said, I mean, there was not as much scrutiny, right? As long as leads were coming in and the numbers. Now, which numbers exactly, I don't know, but I would say that the focus has now shifted to profit and sustainable growth, whatever that means for companies, which was not exactly the case even 1 year ago, right? In any case, we had a great run, and now the party is over, at least for now, because I think that things will get back to let's say a party sort of trajectory again at some point in the future, but for now, yeah, things are like that, and we just have to adjust and adapt.
Buckle down and weather it. So actually, I reached out to you because of your recent LinkedIn post, which was like, it really hit a nerve for me, because typically everyone on LinkedIn is writing about how great things are going, how much they've grown, or at least these are like humble brags about like, okay, it was hard at the beginning, but now, look where we are. And you talked mostly about the challenges and the difficulties. So like, I obviously have a lot of follow-up questions. on that post, and I'm super curious to kind of get into it and maybe unscratch the surface on this whole industry of content marketing and content marketing services for specifically B2B SaaS in this challenging environment. And I'm going to start from the end of my questions, actually, because we kind of touched upon it. SEO has become more competitive. People have been, publishing more content. There has been, as you said, this party, right, where service providers could charge more, but I feel like there are also a lot more service providers than there were like 5 years ago. Like you started 4 years ago. I know a lot of agencies that kind of started around the same time during the pandemic. Maybe something changed for them personally as well. They left their jobs, they started a content agency. How do you feel like this has affected you? How are you, trying to differentiate yourself, stand out from all these other service providers, to essentially position your services differently so people can pick you, for instance?
In the last couple of years, we've been fighting for this concept of mental availability, which I think we discussed. I don't know where it was exactly, in person as well at some point. But what this is basically is that I want Minuttia to be part of the conversation, even if a company decides to go with another provider right now when they are looking for a service provider, right? And in that sense, we perceive ourselves mostly as a media company that happens to offer these services, right? And not as an agency that's only doing stuff like webinars and podcasts and all the things we are doing just for the sake of getting leads and customers and so on and so forth, right? That's how we see like all the activities we invest into and the things that we do. Okay. Now, obviously, you mentioned like other agencies, and one of the points I made with this LinkedIn post was the fact that we saw many of our competitors growing faster than we did in like 2021, 2022, right? Which means that yes, we are doing a good job when it comes to like content and putting out very good stuff out there and trying to build a reputation above anything else. But some of our competitors are beating us when it comes to sales, right? Most likely they have a better way of like selling and essentially presenting the potential value that a client may get from working with them, right? But we compete on the things that we feel most, let's say, most powerful on, right? But at the same time, we understand that we have weaknesses. The thing is that right now, I want to believe that Minuttia is part of the conversation. Competition has definitely, increased, right? Just check on LinkedIn for SaaS, I don't know, marketer, writer, and so on. You will find so many profiles, right? Which makes things more difficult. But at the same time, we are doing this for 4 years. We're not doing it for 10 years. Like there are agencies that serve the SaaS industry for 10 years, and obviously they will have an edge. Like it makes sense that they will have an edge. But we have our position in the market, let's say. I'm not so intimidated about competition as I am about understanding where the market goes and position ourselves accordingly. Now, the truth is that and that's not just Minuttia's problem. It's across the board for most agencies. Like we are looking into that position-wise, we are off. And one of the main reasons why we are off is because if we assume that the incentive of SEO, which by the way, most agents, I'm not saying all, right? What they're doing is SEO content, right? They want to present themselves as like super sophisticated and like whatever. The reality is they are doing SEO content, right? Now the problem is that SEO content exists because of the incentive. The incentive is, the 10 blue links and the traffic these blue links send to websites. If the incentive is not there, which by the way, it could happen on a practical level, Google is sending less traffic to websites, and it could happen on a perception level, which is what's happening right now. Because when you say that, there are CMOs of very big companies like HubSpot or whatever who say that, SEO is not going to be the same and so on. Obviously, that makes a perception shift for all other CMOs who are who see, like, who want to know what the CMO of HubSpot has to say, right? Which is what's happening right now. And in that context, all agencies, Minuttia included, position-wise, are off. Like, because we talk about things like top ranking content and organic growth acceleration and like SEO content. That's gone. Forget about it. You know what? Like, we had a good run, and don't get me wrong, like, this is our bread and butter. Like, I have a family, and we live on the, like, based on what we've built with Minuttia. But I know that this took us from 0 to 1. It's not going to take us from 1 to 10, right? And what I see right now is that most agencies don't get it, that it's gone. Even perception-wise, it's gone. And perception is enough to destroy a business, because, well, if your buyers think that there's no value, and their investors, by the way, think that there's no value on SEO, well, they're not going to buy. So you have to change your offerings, right? And so, to answer your question, and sorry if I prolonged it, but I think that position-wise, most agencies right now, Minuttia included, once again, we are off. I know that sometime early in 2024, most likely in Q1, we need to make a complete change on our position and messaging. But for the time being, I acknowledge the fact that, what we sell, I believe in what we do, but it doesn't matter what I believe if there are things beyond my control that I can't do anything about, right?
This is, like, what you just said is mind-bogglingly interesting. And again, thanks for all the honesty. I think that's something, super rare as well, like talking about the positioning in the market and how the agencies are kind of getting off the mark compared to this perception. And as you said, if HubSpot itself, that have pretty much invented content marketing, right, is sending these signals, and everyone's talking about generative search and how, like, the zero click search will become basically the majority or the reality, then obviously people are sort of scrambling to come up with the next big thing. I have a follow-up question on that. Like, have you thought of how you're going to change, how you're going to adapt to this situation? You mentioned a new positioning from 2024, for instance. Do you have something in mind, maybe like a completely new service? I'm not saying, because we're not like fortune tellers, that we can say, this is how you're going to be able to do SEO when generative search comes, and how to come up with the generative search results. Like, probably it's too early to say that, but maybe you have something completely different in mind that you want to sort of reinvent yourself as.
First of all, what I said is one thing, right? The fact that there is a perception shift, and on a practical level, we will see how big the change will be, right? I'm not going to participate in the echo chamber of fear mongering that exists right now in the SEO industry. But this, at the same time, this is happening, there is an opportunity. It creates an opportunity because, as I mentioned earlier, many SaaS companies will not have, or at least the alternative will not be as clear to them, right? So let's say we don't do SEO content, or let's say, it was 100% of what we were doing and now it has to be 50% of what we're doing. What's then like this gap of 50%? What are we going to do there? How are we going to fill that gap? And I think that we as service providers, if we have the answer to that, we can come in and fill that void, right? Personally, I see that, you know, things are heading towards a media first approach, where service providers can do a few things, but definitely cannot do all things, right? So you can't control the fact that a SaaS company needs to have media personalities, right? And these media personalities have to build themselves into whatever the threats of each personality is, right? So for example, a great example on that is SparkToro, right? They have great personalities behind the brand, like Rand Fiskin and Amanda Natividad. And each of these brands, especially Amanda, has done a tremendous job online with a newsletter that's, you know, sort of like a separate entity, right? An online course, Twitter and LinkedIn, and so on and so forth. That's not something that agencies can really help with, right? Because, I mean, it will be very difficult to adjust to the tone and the voice of that person, whoever that person may be. But at the same time, as I mentioned, where I see the opportunities that there will still be a need for content and other services. We just have to go there and try to, you know, help SaaS companies. It may not be that we do 10 pieces of content per month, all of them SEO content. It may be that, you know what, we will help you launch a we call them media singulars at Minuttia. We will help you launch a separate media entity, like a newsletter. I'm not referring to like the company's newsletter, right, where you will share, I don't know, product news and so on and so forth. I'm talking about a very specific concept, right? We will help you do that and run it. We will help you, I don't know, launch videos on TikTok or produce your podcast and so on and so forth. I think that the need for services will still be there. Just what we do, like the actual content of what we do, will be different. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? But right now, connected to what I said in my previous answer, I don't see that the industry like understands that this is where things are heading towards. And maybe I'm wrong, right? But I think that this is where we are heading towards.
That's an interesting take. And yeah, I generally would agree, because people will still be consuming content, right? But maybe, you know, a different type of content will play a bigger role. So say, generative search will provide you clear-cut answers, the most efficient answers. There was never anything more frustrating than articles written for SEO when you were trying to look up a specific keyword, you know, to get a specific answer, like, how do I exchange the light bulb in my refrigerator, right? And then you would get an article on, you know, the specific keyword, how do I exchange the light bulb in my refrigerator? And you're digging into the intro, and it's like, throughout the history of humanity, refrigerators have, you know, helped so much. I was like, that obviously has to go. Like, Google has introduced time to results as one of the ranking factors in one of its recent numerous algorithm updates. So that is already being taken into consideration, and SG will cater to that eventually. But people will still want to learn and will still want to do exploratory research, right? So not to answer specific questions, but in general to like learn from an authority, right? Like kind of expand their knowledge, or like get them thinking about a particular topic without a very specific goal in mind. So content will still exist, and, you know, branded content will also still exist, but it will evolve into something else than like just these very transactional question answer types of articles. Speaking of which, we mentioned algorithm updates that has also shaken the SEO industry a bit in the last couple of months. Helpful content update, now the spam updates rolling out recently. You even mentioned in your post that like you even lost a client because they thought you were hit by the algo update. How do you handle all these velocity, all this like volatility really of the changes in the SEO world to make sure you can continue providing your services and kind of productize them so it makes sense for your business, right? While also adapting to all these changes.
Yeah, you can adapt and you have to adapt. So that was an incident that was actually very, I don't know, it was a very difficult experience because it was a big website, getting 1 to 1.5, close to 2 actually, close to 2 million visitors per month.
Wow.
Many different use cases for the product, and there was an update. There was a bit of a loss. This happened back in 2021. There was a bit of a loss, and then was another update that was, you know, it had all the characteristics of an algorithm update hit, right? Now, what I think happened back then is a few things that actually apply to this day, regardless of how SEO may have changed, right? So the first sort of mistake, even though obviously all this is just assumptions as to what might have gone wrong, right? But the first is, as I mentioned, the website had a lot of use case pages. It was more than 100, right? Which is not the usual case for SaaS websites, right? But this website had. And one of the mistakes was that the word best was attached to the title tag and meta description of, and I think of the H1 heading as well, of almost every single one of these landing pages, feature pages, right? Use case pages. You can call them however you like, which is not good in retrospect because, well, Google doesn't like absolutes, right? And at the same time, you cannot be the one who says that I am the
You're
best.
the best. Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem why this was a problem in this case is because of the number of pages. If it was I don't know, 3 pages, who cares, right? But it was many pages, and I think that this gave the wrong impression over what we were trying to communicate with these pages, right? The second was, and I think that we do not work with this client anymore, excessive link building. And the problem with link building, how it was practiced, was that it was, you know, just editorial links added not on new pages or pages that are, you know, updated, which is, you know, most likely a new link to be added to a page when a new page goes live or when a piece of content is updated, just editorially added links, right? And to a very, like, to an excessive degree, which definitely didn't like give the impression that something is being done, let's say naturally, right? And the third, which is just once again my assumption, right? I'm not saying that this is what it was, but what was very interesting is that up until this point, the company had certain capabilities. The product had certain capabilities, right? But the company was preparing to launch a new feature, right? And it was, we launched the feature page, and there were some blog posts as well. And once again, there was excessive link building back to the feature page, right? And what was very interesting was that the day that this whole mayhem started, when it comes to sort of the rest of the website and the rest of the topics, the day that it all started, for that new product and that new, let's say, topical area, there was a spike, right? And for all the other ones combined, through Google Search Console, of course, we could be able to see that. This is where things started, let's say, falling apart, right? And the downward trend started to show up. And my assumption in that case was that we did something that Google perceived as unnatural. Why? Because, well, you are perceived as X and you are trying to convince Google that, you know what, now I'm also Y, right? And this was done in a way that was sort of violent and didn't feel natural, right? So these three things, I would say, contributed to that hit or whatever that was. And of course, it was a very difficult experience because, you know, when it comes to traffic, unfortunately, in many cases, especially for companies where SEO is the channel, yeah, it can get really bad and ugly really quickly. So I'm glad that nowadays we don't have to report on any of that. And
yeah, well, that's definitely a challenging situation. You mentioned so many interesting things that are, you know, essentially kind of out of your control, because SEO is not a playbook that works the same way for everyone. Like sometimes you say launch a new product and you have this new positioning and you start, like in our case, we recently launched our product analytics, which is a separate product. Essentially, it's integrated into the same platform, but it's a separate product from user onboarding. And we started publishing tons of content about product analytics, and we aren't aggressively building links to them yet. But, you know, it's also the question of, are you an engagement platform, a user onboarding platform, or are you a product analytics platform? In this case, Google maybe has decided that these are close enough so they can be bundled together. But maybe in the case of another SaaS company, Google decides like, oh, that's something fishy, right? And now, is it the issue of dilution of this domain authority or topical authority? Is it the issue of building too many links? Is it the issue of publishing too fast or too much? And there are so many variables and no way to do this. Like you can't do a regression analysis like, what's tanked our traffic? What was that? I saw that with my partner's website, that he was also like writing a lot of content, but at the same time building a lot of links, and there was a content update and now he got hit. But was the hit due to the links or the content quality itself? Or what was it? Like, you can't tell. So kind of my question is, with all this volatility, all these different variables, how do you scale a content agency to maintain, you know, the quality of the services across clients that have such vastly different needs?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, we have clients in maritime analytics, which, you know, is as niche as it can get, all the way to field service management, online proofing, project management, whatever. So it's definitely challenging. And obviously, we had quality issues in the past, right? If you find an agency owner who tells you that, you know, we never had to deal with quality issues, they are lying. And I'm not saying this lightly. I know most of, you know, our competitors personally, and I know people who work there. And so most agencies have problem with quality issues. It goes back to setting guardrails and developing certain teams to cover certain topics, right? Now, for example, online courses, LMSs, and certain types of audiences that we target through these SaaS companies is something we know, right? So it's easier for us to take a new client that operates in a similar vertical, let's say. But what happened in the past, and we don't let happen again, and we sort of set some guardrails regarding that, even if that means trimming some of our profit, is that we were like, you're an agency, right? You have to take on clients to sort of satisfy or to fuel your growth and to be able to process payments and so on and so forth. So we would take clients, and we were not really experts for the topics they wanted us to write about. And I can tell you that there's a lot of opinion and ego in the SaaS industry when it comes to content, right? Not that this is a bad thing, but there's a lot of it, which you don't find as much in like other industries that may be a bit more traditional. But we had to deal with very strong opinions and very like hard editorial processes. And of course, we learned from there. And one of the things that we are implementing now, especially with the rise of the importance of like the byline and the authorship and who wrote this and who is this person, is she or he an identified like entity by Google? Can they talk about these topics and so on? So we will work with experts. We will be clear with the client. Look, the content lead and the content writer and the SEO strategist and like the people who will work with you are not experts at what we are going to write about. We want this to be super clear, right? We are extremely good at picking up. That's something that we do, right? This is what we do. And we interview our clients and we interview product experts from the company and so on and so forth. So we have process around that, but we are not experts. But we work with experts to sort of edit the piece, review the piece, sure that, you know what, everything is as it should be, right? So just to give you an example, we work with, I think they are the biggest time tracking software in the world, and they also have project management like capabilities, and or not capabilities, like it's more of like a product. And obviously these people know project management, right, and time tracking and all these things. So what we do is that we work with people who are experts in project management, actually have experience, right? They're not going to go through the grammar, typos, and things like that. We have people for that, right? We have editors and proofreaders and so on. But they are going to go through the piece, and they are going to make sure that everything that we say is technically accurate with regards to project management or whatever we may write about, right? It's challenging, but as I mentioned, after having to deal with quality issues a few times, we had to make some like decisions, even if that means like that we had to trim our profits and like make less out of a single piece of content, as long as no one can say anything about the fact that, you know what, like this is not technically accurate or anything like that. So you sort of, through experience, you set guardrails like this, and above all, you put the quality and like the fact that this company trusted you, and you have to deliver the best you can, right?
Yeah, so kind of definitely I can relate a lot of what you said. Division of labor. So in our in-house content team, when I first started it out, we were also working with many different agencies. So I can talk about the like quality issues, you know, forever. We actually recently parted ways with one agency that we've been using for a couple of years, and because they were not able to implement our feedback and kind of get the quality back up to scratch after probably changing one or two of their writers, which means they didn't have the systems in place to, as you said, guardrail the quality. And you know, at first I thought like, shoot, we need to hire people that know everything about products. For me, it was obviously a consideration because I have only one product to write about. We tried that, didn't work out, as you know. we had to ultimately divide the responsibilities. So now we have the experts who create the briefs and check the content quality. We have the writers who are just writing, and we have the proofreaders who, so the writers don't even need to be like 100% perfect in terms of language and grammar, right? And even, all the like SEO boxes, because at the end of the food chain, we even have like a proofreader / editor that handles all of that. So yeah, I think that's the only way to go, essentially. And you're so right about all these opinions and how opinionated the market is, and kind of wanted to just touch up on that. I think it's possible because we're operating in a black box, so nobody can really verify these opinions. So
I don't know, but
what's your take on that?
I don't know. It wouldn't be like good to share my opinion on that, but I will do it either way. I mean, it's problematic when you enter a relationship with a vendor, right? And having an us vs they mentality, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely agree that there are like many bad actors, right? And many agencies that unfortunately like overpromise and like underdeliver and overcharge and all these things, right? But you should always enter the engagement in good faith, right?
Absolutely.
Now, at the same time, I mean, one thing that I cannot understand, like doing this job for a while now, is how can an in-house employee that's with a company for 3 months, right? Or let's say 3 to 6 months, how can this person possibly know more than we know about the products and services like that the company is offering? They can't. I mean, it's just that, okay, they're in-house, they're part of the team, right? Well, this is wrong. The mentality has to be, I mean, we are going to work together so that I can, achieve my goals and help grow the company and so on and so forth, right? Contribute have a positive contribution to the company's growth and objectives and so on and so forth. But you can't do that like thinking that like it's us and it's they. And as I mentioned, like one of the things that I can't get really is, I mean, an agency can definitely learn a company's products and become experts at it. Like it happens. I've seen it happening. We do it with clients, right? So you just have to give some time, but at the same time, yeah, you have to be careful because there are many like bad actors, right? I don't know. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And by no means I meant to be sort of standing against, the vendor. Obviously, if you're hiring someone, you should have a level of trust towards that person, also trust in their expertise. And we also had on the flip side a lot of good runs with service providers, and we were happy with their services as well. One last question, because I know we are over time. Like from your perspective, 4 years in this industry, 4 years of running Minuttia, what has been the most challenging, and maybe what kind of decision do you regret the most and you would do differently with hindsight?
I don't know. Running a business, running an agency in particular is very challenging. It's soul draining. It can really like, it gets you mentally and physically and so on, right? So it took me a while to sort of being able to keep a balance. And this year has been very challenging for sure, right? We had to deal with so many issues. The only thing I regret, which in retrospect is not something I could do differently, because Minuttia is a bootstrap business. It's not like we have runway in the bank and so on. But what I would have done differently is sort of delegate and like hire the right people and delegate as much as I can so that I can focus on other parts of like the business and not be like working in the business as like, you know, the saying goes, working in the business and not on it. That's the biggest mistake. But once again, like in retrospect, now with Growth Waves, I operate differently, right? So we have people running like the tech aspect of it. We have people for design. Most of these things are handled obviously from Minuttia because we have like people are there, right? Someone is handling content and so on. But when you start a business and you start with like exactly $0 in the bank, you can't sort of afford to do that, right? And maybe this was one of the reasons why we didn't grow so fast, as quickly as like some of our competitors did, right? That's it. But I don't know. I would say that even though like the running and growing a business is very challenging, I wouldn't change it. And lately I find a lot of meaning in it. I follow a guy called Andrew Wilkinson. I don't know if you know him, but
yeah.
And he has a holding company, a holdco, and they have, I don't know, like something like 40 companies under this holdco, right? And it's called Tiny, which is also a public company. And he started from, of all businesses, an agency, a design agency, right? Meta Labs.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is still like operational.
Yeah.
It still exists to this day, right? And what he said is that, yeah, agencies may be like difficult businesses to run, right? But they can also be the launch pad for doing other things. And I would say that nowadays, this is how I see Minuttia. It's essentially my launch pad for being able to do things like Growth Waves and other things that like I'm investing in and planning to do, and so on and so forth. And so I have found a meaning in it. And I feel that we still have many, many things to do. And there are challenging times ahead with all these changes that are coming. Big or small, we will see, right? But as I mentioned, I also see the opportunity in it because I know that right now many people feel lost in the sense that they don't know how to navigate these changes. And if you come there as a service provider who knows, I guess you can win, right? So
yeah, I think that's sort of an optimistic note and a good note to end the conversation on. Thank you so much, George. That was super, super interesting, enlightening as well, but like, yeah, mostly very interesting. I guess we'll see, right? So probably we'll touch base in a couple of months and be like, huh, yeah, we were right. Or maybe, oh, wow, actually we were wrong. Things went differently. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. And hopefully chat soon as well.
thank you.